Hi everyone. My name is Ayla, and this is my capstone project named Centering Environmental Justice, Fostering Equitable and Sustainable Communities in the Classroom. I worked alongside Basilica Bio and their co-president, Rel Ingman, who was my site supervisor, and Jason Groves, who is part of the German Studies Department here at the University of Washington, was my faculty advisor. And before I get any further, I wanted to acknowledge the two of them, as well as the rest of the Basilica Bio team, my friends in the POE cohort, and my family for all of their support during this project. Now, you may have heard the term environmental justice before. However, I just wanted to define it in case you haven't. So we define environmental justice, or EJ, as the fair treatment and representation of all people, regardless of income, race, color, national origin, tribal affiliation, disability, etc., in order to address disproportionate health and environmental hazards directed towards frontline communities. So we're talking about marginalized and low-income communities. EJ affects community structure on a social and environmental scale within our society. And therefore, understanding EJ and building equitable communities helps combat larger environmental issues like climate change. Students across the nation are not guaranteed access to EJ learning curriculum, as it is not written into high school standards, um, according to the Department of Education. I took a special interest into this project because of my personal experience. I did not come across the term environmental justice until my first couple of years at the University of Washington. It was never talked about in high school. So this research aims to understand how we can introduce EJ to pre-college level students, because it's an important thing that needs to be accessible for all. Going into this project, my research question was how can we support the development and implementation of environmental justice curricula in high school classrooms? And you can take a peek of this picture, but I will go ahead and explain it further towards the end of the presentation. We will go ahead and talk about the internship and methods here at the top right. As I said before, I interned with Basilica Bio. They're an education-minded and community-oriented nonprofit that was local here in Seattle. With them, I aided in the development and critique of their current environmental justice curriculum supplement directed towards high school teachers. And then I outreached with them to high school educational professionals in order to set up and conduct interviews. Lastly, I developed and delivered a community-engaged presentation centering the socio-ecological impacts of pedestrian infrastructure accessibility. With that presentation, I focused on the light rail system and upcoming projects to the north of the light rail, and then how it impacts surrounding communities. While working alongside Basilica Bio, I also conducted my own independent literature review and analysis of EJ in diverse classroom settings, spanning from grade school up to master degree level courses, mainly focusing on high school, though. From those interviews and the literature review, I was able to analyze the responses and find what the common themes were. The most highlighted motivations focused on reconnecting students and their communities to the environment at a personal and tangible level. The most common barriers from an educator standpoint do open the door towards remediating next steps, as we now know what needs to change in this sector of education. The top three motivations were student engagement, environmental justice accessibility, and socio-ecological relationship growth. I'll start off with student engagement. Teachers said that students were enthusiastic, curious, excited to learn about topics that directly impact them and their communities, things that they can take home to their parents, to their families, and something that's applicable to their own lives. Going on to environmental justice accessibility, I talked about this previously, but since it is not written into standards, students have limited access to this material. Teachers and students think it's very important for us to include this into all high schools because they deserve to know about the socio-ecological health impacts of the things that are in their own communities. Lastly, socio-ecological relationship growth, mainly about reconnecting students and their communities to their environment, to their societies, um, through fostering relationships with their earth. The three barriers that were most common in the interviews were the lack of support, value misalignment, and a time constraint. The top two, lack of support and value misalignment, do inherently connect because they were talked about at a teacher level, a school, district, state, and national level. Mostly value misalignment was talked at a district level. There's just not enough importance placed on EJ topics because there's a lack of awareness. Not everyone knows about these topics. Therefore, it cannot be put at the front of people's minds very often. The time constraint towards the bottom. We know teachers are on a time crunch. They have a lot to get done in a little amount of time. Therefore, if they're trying to implement new sorts of curriculums, materials that they're not familiar with, that they haven't experienced themselves, then it can be overwhelming and difficult for them to do that because they're having to put together these lesson plans without much guidance, without much help, and they're topics that they need um, to grapple with more in order to teach their students. I do also want to mention before I move on that the teachers I was able to interview were located in the greater Seattle area around sites of environmental degradation or environmental hazards, such as the Duwamish River in South Seattle, which is now located or it's now considered a Superfund site because of how much toxins and chemicals and hazardous materials are in the waters and surrounding communities. So I thought it was important to get their perspective on this sort of material for their high school students because it directly affects them. We can move on to broader significance. The reason I chose to focus on teachers is because they play a crucial role in fostering education in general, but environmental justice through the empowerment of their students. They use different modes like awareness and critical thinking, advocacy, and they inspire future generations. Now, turning these results into a reality, we need to provide support to our teachers through funding, through training, and using curriculum supplementals for them. We need to advocate for just and diversified curriculum material like EJ in order to unify alignment at all levels, including the district, state, and national level, to put an importance on these topics. Lastly, we need to embed EJ into scientific literacy across subjects in high school so that it is accessible for all students and we can start meeting the needs, the urgent needs of humans and the environment in our current climate and environmental conditions. If you reference this figure to the right, it is a multi-directional framework that shows knowledge flows where teachers, students, and communities are all conduits of that knowledge flow. As you notice, there are no arrows because this knowledge is passing from one another simultaneously. There's no one direction, but it does show how teachers can relay EJ topics to students and they can bring it then to their communities. And like I said, I would go back to this image over here. I thought it'd be nice to put in here because it is an activity that opened my eyes to environmental justice while working with Basilica. Is the first activity they use when they are visiting a classroom and giving their spiel on environmental justice. So you see here a student mapping their own community layout and pedestrian infrastructure so that they can understand environmental and social health factors in their own community. In the top right of the image, you can see a home, and then next to the home is a highway and a railroad and a bus garage. Down south is a waste facility, and then on the other side of the page is a 4-lane interstate. We do also see other things. We see a sidewalk and a grocery store and a market, a bus stop, a creek. So it's not all bad things, but it's just important to be aware of the factors that surround you because they not only affect you, they affect your community, which inherently affects society. Um, yeah, I'll go ahead and zoom out again if you want an overall image of the poster once more. I just want to say thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope you have a wonderful day.